Most defendants, when faced with a ruling against them, simply accept their fate, pay their fines, and move on. But Pam Bondi? She wasn't like most. When a sudden, blindsiding fine was thrown at her in a Tampa courtroom, she didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't even break stride. Instead, she stood her ground, dissecting the situation with such razor-sharp precision that the very judge who ruled against her found himself questioning his own decision. And the entire courtroom? They were frozen in place, watching as a legal battle transformed into a masterclass in courtroom strategy. This was supposed to be routine. Courtroom 3B, a minor procedural dispute. Nothing more than a quick, uneventful stop in Pam Bondi's otherwise busy day. She had walked into that courthouse the same way she had 100 times before, calm, collected, and entirely unfazed by the towering marble columns and polished floors. To her, this was just another day at work. But here's the thing, Pam Bondi wasn't just another attorney. She was the former Attorney General, a legal powerhouse who had taken on some of the toughest cases in the nation, stood toe-to-toe with some of the most powerful individuals in the country. But today, none of that mattered. Not in this courtroom. Because across from her sat a city attorney, a man in his mid-30s, radiating nervous energy, adjusting his tie every few seconds as if it would hold his composure together. He was waiting for the judge. So was Pam. She barely looked at her notes. She didn't need to. This hearing wasn't supposed to take more than 10 minutes. And then, Judge Raymond Dalton walked in. Dalton wasn't new to this. He was experienced, seasoned, tall, with a graying beard and sharp, unreadable eyes. He didn't just occupy the bench, he commanded it. Most judges ease into a hearing. They take their time, skim through files, exchange nods, establish a rhythm. But not Dalton. "Let's get right to it," he said, his voice flat, leaving no room for pleasantries. Pam straightened, her instincts kicking in. Something felt off. Then, without warning, Dalton dropped the hammer. "The court has reviewed the matter," he stated. "And after consideration, I find the defendant in violation of Local Statute 14B and hereby issue a fine of $10,000, payable immediately." The room went silent. Even the city attorney, who had expected a win, blinked in surprise. Pam didn't react. At least, not outwardly. But inside? Her legal mind was already in motion. No discussion. No arguments. No chance to present her case. Just a sudden, unexpected summary judgment? That wasn't just unusual. It was wrong. Slowly, deliberately, she folded her hands and met Dalton's gaze. "With all due respect, Your Honor, we haven't even begun proceedings," she said, her voice steady. "I haven't presented a single argument." Dalton didn't waver. "The violation is clear. The law is clear. The fine stands." And that's when it hit her. This wasn't about the statute. This was personal. Dalton wasn't just making a ruling. He was sending a message. Pam nodded once, as if she had just cracked a puzzle. "I request the opportunity to present my defense," she said, composed but firm. Dalton leaned back slightly, the hint of amusement flickering across his face. "You're welcome to try, Ms. Bondi. But I assure you, the outcome will be the same." Pam simply turned a page in her file. She didn't need to, but she wanted the moment to land. Then, with a slight smile, she said, "Very well. Let's begin." A shift rippled through the room. The city attorney adjusted his tie again. The stenographer sat up straighter. Legal clerks leaned in, sensing that something was about to unfold. Something worth remembering. Pam looked directly at Dalton. "Just so I understand," she began, her voice calm but deliberate, "this court sees no need for a defense, despite the fact that this statute has been challenged multiple times for lack of clarity." Dalton's jaw tightened. "That's correct." She nodded, as if she expected that answer. "Interesting. Because I happen to know that Section C of 14B was ruled unenforceable in at least 3 cases in the past 5 years." Now, the room was listening. Dalton tried to brush it off. "Those cases don't apply here." "Don't they?" she countered, her tone razor-sharp. "Because in Reynolds v. Clearwater, The appellate court ruled that issuing administrative fines under 14b without evidentiary consideration violated due process. Silence. Dalton finally spoke. Are you threatening to appeal this court's decision? Pam didn't even blink. Your Honor, I don't make threats, she said smoothly. I cite the law. And that's when everything changed. This wasn't a hearing anymore. It was a chess match. Dalton exhaled. You may proceed with your defense. Pam leaned forward. Let's talk about how compliance is defined in the statute, she said. Vague language. No clear standards. No evidentiary threshold. Enforcement is left entirely up to an officer's judgment. Dalton interrupted. The law has been enforced before. Pam nodded. And 4 cases were dismissed for lack of due process. Unless, of course, due process only applies when convenient. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Dalton leaned back, his grip on control slipping. This court does not exist for theatrics. Pam stared at him. Then let's stick to the facts. She held up a case file. In Henderson v. St. Petersburg, a fine under this same statute was thrown out because, quote, law as applied fails to provide sufficient notice or clear standards for enforcement. That's not a defense, Your Honor. That's precedent. Dalton's jaw clenched. The city attorney looked like he wanted to sink into his chair. Pam turned to him. If you have case law that contradicts Henderson, now would be a good time to share it. Silence. Dalton banged his gavel. We'll take a 15-minute recess. Pam smirked. She knew what that meant. He was rattled. He needed time to look up cases, to make calls, to regroup. But when he returned, he wasn't alone. Judge Alan Whitaker walked in beside him, a high-ranking judge with a reputation for precision. The gallery buzzed. This wasn't protocol. This was strategy. I've requested Judge Whitaker's presence, Dalton announced. Requested?
No.
Someone had pulled strings. Whitaker turned to Pam. You believe this fine should be overturned? Pam's response was immediate. I don't believe it, she said. I know it. The battle wasn't over. But it was clear who had already won. And by the time the final ruling came down, Pam Bondi didn't just walk out of that courtroom a winner. She walked out having reshaped the very system that tried to corner her. A legal legend. If you liked that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because in every courtroom battle, there's always more happening than meets the eye. And we'll be right here to break it down.